All right, so we're diving into something that, feels like it's been in the headlines forever, but maybe not so much lately.
Yeah.
The war in Ukraine.
Right.
We're talking about its impact on the markets, and not just the initial shock, which, let's be real, had everyone freaking out a bit.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
We're looking at the long game here, the ripple effects.
Exactly, because those ripples, they just keep going.
They really do.
And they can be even more impactful than that first big splash,
So true.
We have to look at the bigger picture.
Okay, so our main dish today is this article, Ukraine-Russia War, Does It Impact the Markets Anymore? Catchy, right?
Gets you thinking for sure.
So break it down for us. What's the gist?
Well, it's calling us out a bit, don't you think?
How so?
Like, remember back in 22 when the invasion happened?
Oh, yeah?
Markets were a roller coaster.
Totally.
This article, it's asking, has that impact faded or just become less, dramatic?
I see. So less about the daily ups and downs and more about the long-term shifts.
Exactly. Because things might seem calmer now, but...
Right. But is it just an illusion?
That's what we're here to unpack, right? Because even if the initial panic has subsided...
There's still got to be consequences, right? Like a war of this scale, it's bound to leave a mark.
100%. Think of it like this. You throw a rock into a pond.
Okay.
You get that big splash, right? That's the immediate shock. But then what happens?
Ripples, right.
Exactly. Ripples that spread out, impacting the entire ecosystem of the pond. And that's what we're dealing with here.
So what are some of the ripples that we should be paying attention to, even if our portfolios aren't swinging like crazy every day?
Well, energy's a big one. Russia, major energy supplier, right?
Right. And with the sanctions and everything, that's got to have a huge impact.
Huge. We've seen gas prices go haywire, and that impacts everything. Transportation costs, the price of groceries, it all trickles down.
Talk about a chain reaction.
And then there's the supply chain side of things.
Like what kind of stuff?
Well, Ukraine and Russia, they're major exporters, right? Wheat, fertilizer.
Essential stuff.
Exactly. So any disruption there, it has a global impact. We've seen shortages, price spikes, even concerns about food security in certain regions.
So even if we're not glued to the headlines every day, these underlying tensions are still very real.
Absolutely. And that's what makes this article so thought-provoking. It's not just about whether the market is up or down today. It's about asking ourselves what industries are being fundamentally reshaped by this war.
Right, because it's not like things just go back to normal once the fighting stops.
Exactly. The world has shifted, and some of these changes, they're going to be permanent. So the question becomes, what does that mean for investors, for businesses, for the global economy a year, 2 years down the line?
Speaking of long-term, are there any industries you think are being particularly affected?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, one thing that strikes me is how this conflict has really highlighted the interconnectedness of the global economy.
Right, like we were saying with the supply chain disruptions. Exactly. It's a stark reminder that a conflict in one part of the world can have ripple effects that reach every corner of the globe.
And that's why it's so important to stay informed, even if it feels like the news cycle has moved on.
I totally agree with you. It's about looking beyond the immediate headlines and understanding those long-term trends.
It's like that saying, history doesn't repeat, but it often rhymes.
That's a good one.
Even if we haven't seen a conflict exactly like this before, understanding those historical patterns can help us navigate the present and maybe even anticipate the future.
Absolutely. Okay, listeners, we're leaving you with this to ponder. If you had to bet on one industry being transformed by this war 5 years from now, what would it be, and WOHY? Hit us up on social media, and let's keep this conversation going.